God of War Ragnarök and the Curse of Expectation is not just the title of a video written by a man who really wishes he got paid to write professionally, but is the result of my experience with, I'ma say it right here, a pretty gosh darn good video game, critiques withstanding. And it isn't some please think I'm smart title either, it is the somewhat fascinating realisation I had after completing the game that every aspect of God of War Ragnarök is about expectation. The expectations of the players that they will get a fantastic sequel to a much loved PS4 game. The expectations set by the marketing to hype everyone up for the most talked about game of the year, and also the expectation of the characters themselves within the game. As God of War 2018 ended with the prophecy that Kratos would eventually die in his son's arms, the story of Ragnarök is all about prophecy, i.e. the expectation of what will happen and how people deal with that. You can genuinely compare yourself and your expectations of God of War Ragnarök, the video game itself, to its own characters dealing with the knowledge of their apparent fates in the game and feel similar emotions to what you see on screen. This is a realisation that has made me feel, as we say where I'm from, like a right smarty pants.
Classic!
I made a point at the end of my last video that I've had somewhat of an epiphany as of late. Don't worry, I cleaned up afterwards. About how expectation forms your opinion of something. Maybe you don't think about it very much, but how you experience art, any of it, whether that's movies, TV shows, video games, all depend on your expectations beforehand. Yeah, of course, many video games are objectively terrible, but depending on the mood you approach it from, your experience is completely different. Example, Cyberpunk 2077 was announced in 2012 and came out after 8 years of ridiculous hype. While that game was obviously rushed, there is no amount of Keanu Reeves in the world that is going to live up to 8 years of expectations.
Then check this out.
But imagine for a second, Cyberpunk 2077 was announced 4 months before release. CD Projekt Red put a video saying, hey, we've got this new game coming out in a few months, something a little bit different, they're all saying this in a Polish accent by the way, comes out in December, check it out, we think you'll like it. People's experience would be infinitely different. One is the greatest disappointment in modern gaming, the other is a very neat, if clearly quite broken, Cyberpunk RPG with Keanu Reeves. Same games, different expectations. Likewise, I saw Lost in Translation when I was a very lonely 17-year-old boy, and it broke me. It touched me deeply as a guy who would yet go several years without his first kiss. Don't worry, I've been doing some catching up since then. But a sex toy. It's just a tube made of silicone. It's good. It's good. That movie accessed a part of my lonely 17-year-old boy soul and made me cry. It was like therapy. I went to rewatch that film again at age 23 and it bored me out of my mind. Same piece of media, same man, different time.
It gets a whole lot more complicated.
And so with all that knowledge, if you take nothing else from this video, I want you to try this. I loved God of War 2018 to absolute bits. I am a huge fan of intimate, character-driven stories and fell in love with the performances and world shown in that game. I played through it 100% 4 times in 1 month.
You should move on.
I played it so much, I gave myself repetitive strain injury in both of my hands and had to stop playing video games for 3 weeks. That's right, I gamed so hard, I made myself temporarily disabled. So needless to say, I was excited about Ragnarök. But you know what? I forgot the game came out until 4 days before release. I had not watched a single second of a trailer, had avoided all screenshots, and most importantly, anything God of War related on YouTube, click the 3 dots, don't recommend, no random spoilers for me, thank you very much. While I ended up having so many thoughts and critiques about this game, I want to make clear, the blind first playthrough of this game was saturated with endless amounts of wonder. I knew absolutely nothing about what would happen in this game, apart from that I'd presumably play as a tall pale guy with a big red racing stripe down his face. Of course, I had many implicit expectations from playing the last game. I knew what God of War 2018 played like, and what I thought could have been improved, so throughout my playthrough my brain was taking notes. But the freedom to let go and just enjoy, it's fantastic. You can spend countless hours online finding unlimited opinions and information on anything you want, but I found that can often be more stress than it's worth. Because in the age of information, ignorance is a commodity.
I don't much like it, but it is our best play.
And while I ended up having strong opinions about the end of the game and its systems, those opinions only finally formed after I was finished and the adrenaline from the ending had washed away. Now, such is the nature of the gooey existence ball that we call the human brain, that the negatives are the things we focus on. But my first playthrough was full of so many fantastically moments that I would like to take this time to commemorate them and the joy they brought my shriveled, blackened heart. The combat is visceral and smooth, like my forehead. The visuals crispier than a freshly opened bag of Golden Wonder, and the soundtrack? It's really good. But above all of that, above the grim satisfaction of chopping snow hobos in half, or seeing Kratos' beard glisten in the snow like some sort of heavy metal Christmas card, above even Bear McCready's powerful and poignant soundtrack, is the never-ending spectacle of the performances on show. And thankfully, this game has a lot more of them. I'd be very interested to see the size of the script for Ragnarök, because while God of War 2018 is smaller in scope, both narratively and gameplay wise, 2018 is the intimate tale of a man and his son completing his wife's final wish, where Ragnarök is... okay, well, it literally has the end of the world in the title. Ragnarök astounds in the sheer amount of content the cast have to work through. Comparing one to another, God of War 2018 feels like a film, where Ragnarök feels like a full season of a TV show. Returning as Kratos is Christopher Judge, a man who looks somehow the most masculine and feminine person at the same time. And my god, does he get the character. Hearing him discuss his process on the PlayStation channel shows you just how in tune he is with Kratos. As someone who's attended multiple acting classes in the last year and a half, only 2 of which I've been asked to leave, I very much had what you call the process in my mind recently. All those acting buzzwords like obstacles, actions, the work, that type of shit that drama students will watch this video and go, very good. Christopher Judge understands the movement, weight and sense of purpose Kratos has. Kratos does not do or say anything without purpose. When he walks, it's in a slow, controlled manner. When he talks, it's for a reason. You see that reflected in God of War 2018 with his quiet nature and choice one-word answers. In that game, he had not yet opened his heart to the sentimental values his wife had instilled in his son. As such, he addresses people by their nouns. Mimir is head, Brok is dwarf, Atreus is boy. He does not engage in conversation. He gives one-word answers because anything more than that would be unnecessary. For me, the most exciting aspect of Ragnarök was seeing how a man like Kratos, when softened up a little bit, would become more affable. And it's fascinating. We see how Kratos now respects people for their qualities and does not feel shame in expressing that. He considers Mimir a good friend and lauds him as the smartest man alive. He sees the progress his son has made as a warrior and the unique skill of the dwarves with their lifelong experience in craftsmanship.
What happened to all the armor we made you already?
I used it.
They are no longer just head, boy or dwarf. Most importantly, however, the performance never delves into needlessly sentimental. Some of the writing falls into those whimsical Americanisms that people often describe as feeling like something out of a Marvel film. For the vast majority of the time, Christopher Judge keeps that dignity and does not resort to the now very tired, quippy responses that will nullify any sort of dramatic tension because hee hee ha ha, what if Mimir called Odin a wanker?
Sorry, overstepped, yeah?
Sidebar here, the game definitely suffers from that in areas, but frankly, not as much as I expected. Mimir in this game, as he did in the previous one, falls victim to some of that American writing, by which I mean he's a quippy little man who talks in situations where it would be much better if he just kept his mouth shut.
And keep the change, you bastard!
Okay, I appreciate Mimir, that sounded cool in your head, but keep it yourself next time. Mimir also likes to speak up during combat, a little habit of his that often feels very forced. He's this wizened old man with a proper Scottish accent, and yet he feels the need to shout ringside encouragement like a lad at an MMA match.
Take it off off, man. You got this.
Oh, and I should also explain that the guy playing Mimir is from Edinburgh, and if you're from Glasgow, like I am, then everybody from Edinburgh sounds like a f***ing idiot. But all of those are opportunities in which the actor should feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm Scottish, and I can tell you right now that's not how we speak. In which case, a good writer and director would listen to that feedback. Oh, and one last note about the whimsical, like funny American writing. I despise this gosh darn tootin' dwarf lady you have to interact with so much. She is such a blank, I am trying to be funny, wacky character, and I despise her. She has absolutely no other character traits. She's creepy as hell as well. There is multiple dialogue strings where she comes on to both Kratos and Freya. It makes everyone uncomfortable. Like, even the characters in the game do not like the fucking way she talks.
Hi there. I wanted to ask, do you want me to stop talking about your muscles and how you look and stuff? Because it seems like it's making you all wiggly, like in a bad way.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, no, I appreciate you've noticed that, and you will now address it by fucking not talking anymore. You will cease speaking, you'll shut the fuck up. Cheers, love, thank you. Back to Christopher Judge's performance, however, in which Judge finds a very realistic evolution of Kratos. A version of the man where he is comfortable in expressing himself. He's still stoic, and the same person fundamentally, but he takes that inner wisdom and experience and channels it well, not crushing it up inside him until he has an outburst. There are certainly some characters that I'd argue Kratos has perhaps too much patience with. If there's one thing Kratos hates, it's people who do not speak clearly, and his visit with the Norns demonstrates him as having exceptional patience, even more so than Freya.
My son was born. Shut up!
Yes, Kratos has evolved, but I'd still like to see some of that fight inside of him, especially considering there would be no greater frustration to the man than speaking to these 3 fucking vegans in the woods. In my opinion, I think seeing Kratos throw his axe at one of their feet in a show of frustration would be closer to the Kratos we know. All of this means, however, that when Kratos does have those fatherly, tender moments, Jesus Christ, does it hit hard. The moment that does it for me, easily the most powerful piece of acting in the game, is the great sequence when Atreus returns from Jotunheim and is reunited with the none too pleased Daddio. Their discussion is cut short by a new Valkyrie that, in a moment of Kratos' weakness, is revealed to be Freya. Atreus, overcome with emotion, goes into bear mode, as many teenagers often do, and Kratos, forgetting about Freya entirely, wrestles him down to the ground, saying in a soft, reassuring tone,
"She was our friend."
Oh my god, I'm gonna sob like a baby just talking about this. Have you ever seen a parent out with their loved one who has some sort of condition, a disability or something like that, and they end up having an episode? Maybe they're in the middle of the shops and their son has a seizure or a panic attack. The type of situation that the average member of the public would be shocked and feel awkward to witness. But in that moment, the parent doesn't care about any of that. They don't feel uncomfortable, they don't feel worried what people will think, they just want to make sure their child is okay. That is Kratos in this moment. He has a sword to his throat, and when he sees his son in distress, he doesn't take that opportunity to gain the advantage on Freya. He throws her to the side, literally placing her to his back. Fully exposed. She could just run up behind and slit his throat if she really wanted to, but he stops his son from losing control. You hear that reassurance in his voice. He is a concerned parent, first and foremost. His action in that moment is to not stop Atreus killing Freya, is to make sure his little baby boy is okay. And I'm going to start crying all over again. He's not the only character, however. Oh my god, before I forget, Sindri and Brock have evolved from somewhat comedy characters into fully fledged members of the cast, with maybe the most dramatic and sad arc of them all. Sindri's performance after Brock's death is simply heart-wrenching.
I gave you everything. My skills. My friendship, my home, my secrets, my treasures, and you just kept taking. And now what have I got? Not even my family.
Hey!
Then we have Ryan Hurst as Thor, and goodness gracious me, what a performance. His reveal is one of the best in the game, as while he is every bit as huge and powerful and just a thick boy as we had come to expect, There is such a sadness in the man as you can see him beholden to whatever his father wants. You see how battle lights him up, excites him, but around Odin he is a dejected man. The man's what, 9 foot tall, but you wouldn't think it when you see him talk to his dad.
Go ahead and try being nice to him. See where that gets you.
You see his family dynamic, you can hear the arguments he has with his wife, his alcoholism, the frustration that his wife has with him, being beholden to his father, the disappointment of his daughter. You see his, I don't want to be that guy, but his ridiculously hot wife. Like, my god, is it just me? This is embarrassing. I got butterflies when I saw this video game character. I must have a thing for long hair, this fucking set me back. Played by Uncharted's Elena Fisher, no less, and of course his daughter Thrud, aka a cave woman in Horizon Zero Dawn cosplay. Can you see it? I can't unsee it. It was the first thing that popped into my mind, hasn't left. Thor's mind is broken from so many different angles, and the build up to Kratos finally snapping that little bit of sense into him, only to see the betrayal from his father. My goodness, did I shout out loud at the TV, holy shit, when I saw that happen or not? That little glimpse of redemption in Thor's final moments before a horrible betrayal that left me shocked. Beautiful storytelling. Amazing. Incredible. And then finally, Richard Schiff is Odin. His initial reveal is somewhat messy as it's overshadowed by Thor and can leave the player feeling a little bit confused because it's just so fleeting. But as we see later in the game, I think Odin's character is explained most gracefully when Atreus gets to Asgard for the first time. We see this man who isn't necessarily the crazed bearded Norse birdman gouging his eyes out and screaming at the sky that we thought. He is this polite, cunning, almost politician-like figure. You see his power demonstrated not through magic and blood, but the way other people treat him. Thor, a man twice his size, listens to every whim of his, and any attitude will not be tolerated by Odin. Heimdall, who I haven't mentioned, but maybe is one of my favourite characters, he's Dennis Reynolds. Don't tell me this guy isn't a shit-eating, purple contact lens magical boy Dennis Reynolds. He finally shuts his goddamn mouth when Odin shows up and simply asks,
This young man, who is my guest, is covered in mud. Care to explain?
There's an old acting saying, I can't remember how it goes exactly, but the general gist of it is, you don't act like a king, you act like other people know you're the king. That is, you don't act all regal and proper and sit up straight and all that. No, you're the king. People will do what you tell them to, and you can sit there slumped in your throne. You can pick your nose if you want to. You can tell people where to go and what to do because they're going to do it. Because you're the fucking king.
Dismissed. Go.
Gladly.
Richard Schiff gets this, but also doesn't seem to openly take advantage of that. He still acts polite and considerate.
You made it. I am so honored.
He is evil, dare I say, dastardly, but in a way far more interesting than the one-dimensional crazed old man we'd come to expect. Perhaps best is that Richard Schiff is not playing a bad guy. I'll give you an example right here. I haven't played Callisto Protocol, but I know that your boy Starkiller right here is playing a bad guy, right? Look at him. I haven't heard a word of dialogue from him, but I know that he's evil. I, as many other people might, do not find that interesting because most bad people, apart from true, actual, unrelatable sadists, do not act like quote-unquote bad guys. Every bad guy is the good guy of their own story, and Odin captures that so perfectly. He does not do the horrible things he does because he takes glee in murder, he does it because he feels he has to. When this skinny little man drives a spear through his son's heart, he doesn't laugh maniacally or take joy in the murder. He's annoyed that he had to do it. He doesn't want to, but he has convinced himself it's what must be done. He says it right here.
I didn't want this. I did not want this.
Even midway through the final battle with Odin, the dust settles and he is the first to spot Atreus, and he doesn't attack him. He doesn't take advantage. Odin is obsessed with whatever possible knowledge this mask might bring him, and he feels that he is destined to do something great with it, that they can do something great with it. And so he gives Atreus space and reasons. Some people, my friend included, say they don't think Odin demonstrated his power enough in Ragnarok, but on the contrary, Richard Schiff's performance proves that you don't have to. His power is demonstrated through his cunning, the respect and fear others hold him in, and the shocking lengths he will go to get what he wants, even if that means shoving a spear through your son's heart. It's fucking fantastic stuff. Oh yeah, and fuck you, Heimdall. Get your arm blown up. You wee dick. I won't talk about him much, but what a great villain. I hated him the moment I saw him. He was bellissimo the whole time. Kratos exercising his self-control not to kill him, but Heimdall is such a prideful fucking the implications piece of shit. He forces Kratos to finish the job, and even in that moment, Kratos does not go back to his old ways and destroy him horribly and viciously. He controlled chokes him to death until he knows he's not going to be a problem anymore. One of my favourite sequences in the game. Just great, and a great boss battle.
He's a lot, I know.
Even though it's never explicitly stated what makes the spear so like hard for Heimdall to predict, I don't know. Because there's a part where like Atreus goes to shoot him in the back and he catches that, so what's so special about a spear that can, I don't know, it was a cool battle. I liked it, it was neat. So yes, the many gripes that I'll talk about from now on, I shall admit, God of War Ragnarok, perhaps the best performances in any video game to date. Moving on, however, those aren't the only good things this game has. 'Tis a video game after all, and forgive my language, but heck yes, we have some improvements. Okay, so easy number one position is the Draupnir spear.
It is a good spear.
It's brilliant. It's simply brilliant. Its story inclusion is quite sweet and mystical, gives some depth to Brock, which I originally wasn't expecting, and the sound design is what I can only describe as juicy. The moveset is fast and satisfying. Just like the other weapons, it also has uses in environmental puzzles, not just combat. Anytime a game makes weapons useful outside of combat is A+ game design in my book. The only minor complaint I have of the spear is that the aim to R2 feels a bit weak and awkward. Apart from that, great stuff. My favourite weapon in the game. A shockingly good design decision is the inclusion of interactables in the environment now. Kratos being able to rip trees from the ground and smash it straight into Thor's belly is brilliant on multiple fronts, even if some ecologists may be upset by Kratos' disregard for our tree friends, and for perhaps the most violent example of fat shaming in any video game to date. One, flavour-wise, Kratos has always been about grand displays of strength. He flips temples, kills gods, opens jam jars one-handed.
This helps out a lot. I had a pickle jar the other night and it would not open for nothing.
While these spectacular feats of strength are not seen as much in the Norse saga, it's always been something to look forward to in a God of War game. Additionally, these environmental interactions encourages knowledge of your surrounding and importantly goes to negate some of the complaints of the combat. That is that there's bad guys all around you, but you can only face in one direction. It's a lot easier to stop enemies from surrounding you when these hazards serve as giant insta-kill attacks, sometimes from a distance, sometimes as a sweeper right around you. Great inclusion, wish we saw more of them as they taper off in popularity by the end. Another welcome improvement is Ragnarok, unlike its predecessor, understands that part of being an RPG means you have to account for different playstyles. As such, the potential for different builds and playstyles is far higher in Ragnarok. I always wanted to have a high stun/rage build in 2018 as I loved the barehanded combat so much. Ironically, the barehanded combat from 2018 has now been gutted. Oh, don't worry, I'll get back to that later. But I was able to create that dream build from all those years ago. Now I am rewarded for repeatedly attacking already stunned enemies and get a damage boost the higher my rage. On top of that, the amulet system has now been simplified, Spartan's rage has been nearly universally improved, Kratos also unlocks two other types of rage abilities, Wrath and Valor. My only critique here is that these abilities need to be swapped out like runic attacks, whereas activating Spartan's rage and then giving the player multiple button prompts to select between the three modes mid-combat would be a lot more enjoyable. I could go on and on, but a lot of the changes in the gameplay of Ragnarok are not necessarily blank improvements, but just different takes on existing ideas from 4 years ago. Some welcome, others not so much. I swear to God, I have been here for 21 minutes. I know how to do the puzzle. I know how to do it. Come on. Why? I have had colonoscopies swifter and less painful than this fucking puzzle. Ragnarok struggles with the expectation of itself and, understandably, tries to set itself apart from God of War 2018. But there are many changes in this game that feel like alterations not for the sake of improvement, but simply for the sake of change itself. I'm going to mention this first not because it's the most important change, but because it was literally the very first thing I noticed when I started up the game. The user interface is massive. Very much a positive direction led by Sony first-party titles, God of War Ragnarok joins the likes of The Last of Us Part 2 in having so many accessibility options. It does not matter if you're blind, deaf, or some sort of anthropomorphic fish person who's somehow gotten hold of a PlayStation, you will be able to enjoy this game.
That is superb designing, absolutely first rate.
Your accursed, damp, slippery fins need not stand in the way of fun, as we have more sub-menus than any person would reasonably know what to do with. A smashing move, and oh, that was Scottish, wasn't it? A smashing move, and I hope that people that otherwise might not be able to enjoy video games will get to enjoy God of War Ragnarok. That's all great and fantastic and lovely, but could they please patch in a minimum font size that isn't designed to be visible from space? You ever play a port of a game that makes you realise it was made for a portable console? It looks so crisp and shiny, and then you see how big the button prompts and subtitles are, and you go, oh yeah, this was a PSP game. I had that with Ragnarok, but even worse still, my initial thoughts were, Jesus Christ, I feel like I'm playing on an iPad. Cory Barlog's original vision of God of War 2018 was a game with no or barely any UI at all. That ended up being too restrictive in the end, but the one-shot camera aesthetic very much adheres to that minimalism. With that in mind, the UI look of the Norse Saga has always felt kind of off for me. The second I saw the first objective prompt in 2018, I remember thinking, oh, that doesn't feel right. They don't even use a font that matches the game's theme. It's very clean and modern, and I'm not sure that makes it more attractive. Any attempts to limit the UI's invasiveness has been completely forgotten in Ragnarok, as the user interface and menus is now so large it makes information ironically harder to ascertain. Pause God of War 2018 and you see slick menus with items distinctly separated and easy to find at a glance. Cut to Ragnarok and you are bombarded with a spreadsheet of words and numbers. My girlfriend is currently playing through on a smaller screen where she finds it quite comfortable to look at, but on a large television, the environment a grand cinematic game like this ideally strives for, it feels needlessly busy, and I still have trouble finding information quickly in these menus, even after a 100% playthrough. I'm really hoping they patch it. That and the fact that even though you can adjust the HDR paperwhite brightness of the game, reading the lorebook section of the menu still feels like opening up a portal to the sun in your living room.
Wow, that's such interesting lore. I'm so glad it's the last thing my eyes will ever see.
That is not the headline example of this section of the video though. The aspect of God of War Ragnarok that defines the philosophy, different but not better. The poster boy, the very definition of such philosophy, is something that I noticed within the very first femtosecond, that's right, I'm quick, I was able to throw a punch. This game removed nearly all of the bare-handed combat. The fantastically smooth, brutal punch and kick fest, the embodiment of Kratos' animalistic rage. He doesn't need weapons because he's got so much fucking dad strength, you can just rip apart undead wood people like undead wet toilet paper people. And they removed almost all of it. The buttery smooth slick moveset, which meant when Kratos threw his axe, he was still able to combo and transition seamlessly between moves. I even made a little spreadsheet to visualise it just for you guys. Aren't I I'm such a good content creator. God, I'm a cool guy. Thankfully they kept in the sprint attacks, but the other moves like the dash forward R1, which was the most used attack in 2018, you would throw your axe, you would dash punch, you would retrieve your axe and continue a combo. These were fundamental moves that made 2018's combat and combo potential, as some YouTube wizards taught us, so high. I could moan about this for literal hours. From the first second I noticed it, to now at my 100% completion, it still baffles me. It irritates the fuck out of me. Someone talented, many years ago, created those moves in that system. All they had to do was keep it. Not change it, not even improve it. Just keep it in the game. And they didn't. They chucked it in the bin and replaced it with nothing. At the risk of sounding like one James Rolfe.
What were they thinking? What were they thinking? What were they thinking?
By the way, have you seen his hair? Like, I know it's rough, man. It's rough, but you just gotta shave it. You just gotta do a Jordan, you gotta get rid of it. Because like the fucking egg with a toupee look, it's not good. Like a little flap of skin, it's like a little foreskin, it's not. You just gotta take the dive. I mean, come on, like, what were they thinking, you know? If you make a purposeful effort to ignore it and try not to use the bare-handed moves, it's admittedly not that bad, since the spear is such a fast alternative. But ignoring a problem doesn't not make it a problem. It's like saying, oh, my partner's a great guy. He murdered his family and is a prolific paedophile, but if you ignore those aspects of his personality, he's a right good laugh, so he is. Some of the barehanded attacks and animations from 2018 have been torn and repurposed into the different custom shields you can now get in Ragnarok, which, to be honest, all feel very clunky. Once again, these feel like an idea that got through because it was different, not necessarily because it was better. I only ever used the Dauntless shield because its double tap L1 is that dash punch I miss so dearly. It also encourages parrying, a skillful technique that feels nice when you get rewarded for it. The sound design treat that is the shield punch combo has been moved to a custom shield now. The new Onslaught shield allows Kratos to charge towards enemies and throw them into the air. It's great fun, but you can't do any parry attacks anymore. The shields have moves that, by themselves, are fleetingly useful and somewhat clunky, but together, as we saw in the last game, would form a really functional and robust moveset. I'd like to use some other shields, because they seem to have a different spice to add to the combat, but without extra mobility of the dash punch or other barehanded moves, you simply feel held back most of the time. Even sadder yet, the original Guardian shield, Faye's gift to Kratos, has been nerfed significantly. The parry attacks have barely any impact anymore, and this is in a build of mine that was very stun and barehanded focused. Likewise, the culling of our favourite punchy, kicky moveset is not the only victim to the different but not better mentality. The delayed attacks of the Blades of Chaos were simply removed. They're not there anymore. They were the most useful moves of that particular weapon, as they were fast, juggled enemies really well, and were reasonably powerful, meaning that if you had the patience and skill to use them without getting hit, you'd get a large payoff. And so, of course, they removed it for no reason. The Blades held R1 attack used to be a useful space clearer. Moves like that of which are especially useful in a game like God of War, where you're constantly strafing, facing in one narrow direction, but are surrounded by enemies from every angle. Because of that, any attack that can clear space around you is of specifically important utility. The new held R1 Blades of Chaos move in Ragnarok is now what used to be the delayed R1 move from God of War 2018, except it feels a lot worse. It's a lot slower, and holding R1 doesn't do the quick combo by itself. It actually does a normal attack and then awkwardly snaps to the quick combo. I hate it. I've tried to utilise it so many times, but it's just a simple direct downgrade and it makes no sense. There's other changes that have more merit to them. The held R2 Leviathan Axe attack now throws enemies, which adds useful utility. The ranged R2 Blades of Chaos attack that now charges enemies with fire is now arguably more useful than the simple sweep that was in the last game. And being able to close a distance with the Blades held R1 attack is also a very welcome change. While I'm here, I might as well get it all off my chest. I have a lot of gripes with the combat. Number 1. Why does Kratos still stop to switch his weapons? It's irritating and makes comboing from a distance more difficult. He's powerful enough to flip temples, but for some reason can't run and get his phone out his pocket at the same time. Kratos' Spartan kick still feels very weak and awkward. I've been playing some Evil West, which, I can't believe I'm saying this, actually has better barehanded combat than God of War. When punches land, you feel like all that energy is being driven from the main character into the enemy, and that game also features a front kick, but has great speed and snappiness, whereas Kratos feels like he's trying to step over a wet dog poo. Kratos' quick turn is now mapped to block plus down on the D-pads, which makes quick turning look less like an intended mechanic, and more like Kratos is really excited for walkies. The enemy variety in Ragnarok is great, but many of them are simply too fast, meaning trying to hit them at range is a waste of time. Berserkers in particular like to move halfway across the battlefield, constantly making it frustrating to fight them as your focus is taken away from dodging and attacking, and is replaced with you just running after them in the battlefield. Enemies also have hyper armor, meaning they can drive through your attacks, but there's no indication to the player which attacks those may be. Parrying is no longer a guaranteed interrupt, and it's no longer indicated to the player which attacks must be parried multiple times to stop the enemy. While there is no longer any delayed attacks for the Blades of Chaos and Dropnir Spear, they still follow the delay timing where if you hit the triangle button with the correct timing, you instantly charge the blades or do a charged spear explosion. Unlike the Leviathan Axe, however, there is no visual indication of that timing, so you only have a very subtle controller vibration to time it correctly, a piece of animation that was in the last game for the Blades of Chaos, by the way. I'm sure there's more I'm forgetting, but there's a lot to talk about, isn't there? Opinions aside whether or not any of these are objectively better or worse than their predecessor, there's one thing that could have made everyone happy. This game now allows you to disable skills you previously unlocked, something that would be very useful if you could choose between attacks. For example, keep the held R2 attack from God of War 2018 and add the new one in Ragnarok. If the player doesn't like it, let them disable one and choose the other. Simple fix. The new Heldar 1 attack for the Leviathan axe is a frost wave that focuses on runic damage, where the last game had a spinning attack that was great for juggling. Why not keep both and have the player pick between them based on their build? But strangely, while the game gives you the option to disable skills, it does not let you choose alternatives. Much to my pea-brained confusion, the designers seem to understand the player might not want to use certain moves, but offers them no alternative. Alternatives that would have been free, because many years ago, someone already made them. It's different, but not better. It defies logic and feels like such unconfident design compared to the rest of the game. In God of War 2018, everything had a delayed moveset, where you had to pause skillfully mid-combo, where Ragnarok doesn't. Why? Likewise, there's simple gaps in the controls that could be fulfilled with new moves. There's no dash R2 attacks. That would be a welcome addition, as the best way to cover space is with a dash attack, and apart from the spear they all feel a little bit slow. Make a dash R2 attack for the Leviathan axe where Kratos does a high stun jab at the end of his axe with quick recovery. It would be a nice balanced complement to the slower, higher damage spin he does with the R1 dash.
I could go on for hours. I feel like there are so many obvious opportunities for reasonable expansion on the combat.
Use what worked, give the player new options, and expand the moveset to cover the game's weaknesses, namely Kratos' fixed camera. Continuing on, this game has less runic attacks than the last one, ignoring the spear of course. The few runic attacks that are new, simply
they're shite, they suck.
Some bad ones from the last game have made their way over into Ragnarok, and maybe most importantly, they take far too long to find. Hell's Touch, aka the most useful attack in the game, is the very first runic attack you can get in God of War 2018, maybe 45 minutes into the game. In Ragnarok, you find the same move in the second optional area of Alfheim, in my case, 43 hours into my adventure.
What? Why?
This game is so large, why didn't we receive the old ones quicker and get new ones in the far-flung optional areas of the world? I'm genuinely asking, I want to know, at least with the story discrepancies I have problems with. I can formulate some idea of what the team was thinking when they made their decisions, but I am completely at a loss here. It's just bad design. Thankfully, there are other aspects of Ragnarok that differ from 2018, that are, 1, much more confident in their execution, and 2, successful.
And also, I'd like to move on, because I'm sick of talking about the combat, and I can feel multiple kidney stones forming.
The Art of the Reveal, that was originally going to be the title of this video, as God of War Ragnarok is a game almost as much about the reveal as it is about expectation. God of War 2018 is an intimate one-camera shot about a man and his son tasked with fulfilling his wife's final wishes. It's a low-concept idea bolstered by the hefty reputation of Kratos and its fantastical setting. While the game goes on to feature giant snakes, small blue people and a tattooed man with nerve damage, backdropped against the pantheon of Norse mythology, a lot of the game's charm is how small it is. The game does not feel the need to explain every possible piece of lore and knowledge the game may want the player to know. And that's one of my favourite things about it. By the end, there's a lot the player does not know. What Thor or Odin look like, what Svartalheim, Vanaheim or Asgard look like, what Odin may even end up wanting with Kratos and his son, and countless other Norse characters we know will become relevant like Skoll and Hati. God of War 2018 uses its time to flesh out the characters and environments to a degree of quality that only serves to excite the player about what has not been shown. God of War 2018 shows us the value in letting the player's imagination do just a little bit of the work. God of War Ragnarok is fundamentally a very different type of narrative. Where God of War 2018 is an intimate story of a god and his boy, Ragnarok is a fully fledged epic, chalked to the godly gills of many characters, locations, twists and turns, and for the most part, it does a fantastic job. I love that close-knit feeling of God of War 2018, but I think we really should give praise to how vastly different the games present a story. I skipped most side activities until the end of Ragnarok and finished my playthrough after 26 hours. And unlike The Last of Us Part 2, the game certainly earns that length. There are notable side effects of the game's ambitions towards such a grand scale, however. Many aspects of Ragnarok can feel like the awkward excess of 2 additional games worth of story that the writing staff tried their best to cram into one. Cory Barlog quoted several years ago that there would only be one more game in the Norse saga, and so I thought this was the team struggling to fit their story to the expectations of Cory. As it turns out, however, a recent spoilercast video from GameSpot revealed that whether or not the story would take 1 or 2 more games to conclude was on the table for a while. This video isn't all that great, by the way, as the game's director, Eric Williams, is questioned by a man who has seemingly never spoken to another human being in his life.
And it's something that feels like, who's like, and he's like, felt like, to like, or like, just like, there's like, and it's also like, it's sort of like something like that. Yeah.
The game does a remarkably good job to fulfill that expectation in many respects, but forgets the lesson the last game proved. Just because you can tell the audience something, doesn't mean you have to. The start of God of War Ragnarok has all the best examples of this. The first one for me being Faye. And a surprise to me, through a dream early in the game, we are finally revealed what Faye, Kratos' beloved wife that we only ever see wrapped in cloth on her funeral pyre, looks like. Now, keep in mind the difference between revealing a character like this in the last game to Ragnarok, something with 4 years of a time difference. In God of War 2018, we introduced the characters in the world for the first time. Having flashbacks to Kratos and Faye would be a good outlet for Kratos, a man of few words, to reflect on his path. In Ragnarok, however, Faye is a character we have already resigned ourselves to not knowing what she looks or sounds like, meaning that if we are introduced to her after all this time, then it should be with significant purpose. What is the woman who softened Kratos' heart like? Is she stern with him? Is she loving and open? Does she appeal to some aspect of his personality that I haven't even thought of? Does she know about all those sex mini-games he's been in?
I wasn't done yet.
This is something, unfortunately, we never actually find out. Our introduction to Faye in first flashback is very non-eventful. We see that Faye was also strong like Kratos, but nothing of note really happens, and then Kratos wakes up in a nightmare. Both expectation and the reveal come together here. The problem isn't that we don't see what Faye's love for Kratos was like, or vice versa, it's that the writers presented us with the opportunity to do so, but then didn't. The beginning of Ragnarok is already quite slow, and a scene like this would definitely be served better on the cutting room floor.
And you know, it occurs to me, as I say all this, that someone might watch the video and scoff and go, wait a minute, John, are you saying they should cut things out of the video game? Yes, it's called editing.
As a writer myself, I can tell you it hurts when you have to cut a good joke, or a scene, or a moment, or a thought, but if it doesn't serve the goal of the whole piece, then it gets cut. Some moments are better left to the imagination, or under a special features menu. The next big reveal is Odin, and this was one of the first big moments of the game I remember making note of. One that my girlfriend agreed with me as well, so I definitely feel like I'm not losing my mind here. Plainly put, Odin's introduction is a bit shit.
What kind of wisdom is that?
We see that Atreus' cheese-fueled fever dream at the end of God of War 2018 was correct, and indeed Lightning Santa Claus is coming to town. This scene plays out as we saw it 4 years ago, albeit with a lankier boy this time. Except, Thor, surprisingly, asks to be invited in.
I have meat!
We see that Thor is every bit as fat, angry, and full of meat as we expected. We see the tension between the two gods as we might expect, but we also see a sadness in Thor, some depth that we did not expect. I discussed earlier how much of a fantastic, in-depth, real villain Odin is, but brush that aside for the moment because the audience doesn't know any of that yet. We think Odin of a crazed old man who gouged his eyes out in the pursuit of knowledge and hung himself just to see what the afterlife would bring him. We've heard many stories of just how callous and mad he is, and he's probably smelly as well. And then this guy pops up. Suddenly, our worldview is shattered as the most dangerous man in all the realms reveals himself to be a skinny Yankees fan with an eye patch. Odin comes in to talk reason with Kratos and his son, ask that Atreus stop looking for Tyr, setting off the events of the game. Interestingly, respecting Kratos' power and the somewhat unfortunate interactions with his family members in the last game. Of course, the palest boy in the West does not like being told what to do, and then we have the best boss fight in the game. The reason I brushed through that summary so quickly is that is just what it feels like to the player. When we see Odin as we didn't expect him, we don't have time to reconcile our new view of this character. Our attention is split between the tension our angry lightning guest and Kratos have, and the plot Odin is delivering. Then before you know it, you're in a boss battle. Odin's presence in this scene isn't strong enough to warrant his introduction. By the time you finish fighting Thor and have a second to think about what just happened, the first thing that popped into my mind was,
that was weird.
I think a much more powerful alternative would be Thor being the messenger by himself, accompanied by some of Odin's ravens. When Kratos refuses, we get our boss battle with Thor, but we still have that moment where Atreus later tells us that off-screen Odin talked to him and offered him a stay in Asgard. It would still fulfill the story properly. Thor would remain at the centre of the scene, we would discover the driving point for the story, and after we would be even more filled with curiosity about Odin. Most importantly, however, Atreus' first visit to Asgard would serve as the player's proper introduction to the character, which would be incredible because this scene, even with the problems of the introduction, is fantastic.
What, that's not good enough for you?
Atreus finally landing in Asgard would be filled with even more anticipation by the player. As more of Asgard is revealed to us, there is constant chatter with Skuld and Heimdall about the realm, its history, and the Allfather. Think about how much more impactful that is if we still haven't met Odin by this point. This would culminate in fighting the biggest shit-eater in all the realms, a tense moment in which we would expect Atreus to be beaten badly if not killed outright by our purple-eyed Dennis Reynolds, and that tension would be cut by a question.
This young man, who is my guest, is covered in mud. Care to explain?
And we, the player, see that this mysterious man is Odin. This is the guy we've been hearing so much about, and he's nothing like we expect. Except, unlike the beginning of the game, this sequence takes all the time in the world to demonstrate just how deep the character of Odin is. He's not mad, frothing at the mouth. He's seemingly kind, cunning, loved by people. He's driven by a goal that he seems to sincerely believe in. There's still something up, but he's a much more nuanced character, and in the moment both Atreus and the player get a chance to, and have all the time to, reassess what they thought of Odin. It's a fantastic sequence that shoots up the pacing of the game, and I think this moment being Odin's reveal to the player would cement it as a highlight of the game. Those main reveals now discussed, there are many more moments where the team at Sony Santa Monica felt the need to fill Ragnarok with lore and experiences, but in the process left some of the important quality behind. For example, many people complained that the finale, that is Ragnarok itself, is quite rushed, which I do agree with, but not to the extent of some other people. I will admit, I did understand people's outrage just a little bit more when I saw a YouTube comment that said, "Lol, we spent more time picking fruit than we did at Ragnarok," and I thought, yeah, you know, you're right, that's fair enough actually. Ironwood and meeting Angrboda is well regarded as the most boring part of the game. The narrative purpose of that section is Atreus meets another giant. She goes, "Hey, I'm supposed to give you these balls." Atreus goes, "What?" She says, "You'll figure it out." And then Atreus gives one of the balls to a snake that becomes Jormungandr, and we leave. By the way, sidebar, I really like how fleetingly the creation of Jormungandr is addressed. I already knew that Loki is supposed to be Jormungandr's father, so I was worried they would spend all this time on how to legitimise some sort of giant snake lady impregnation. I had no idea what they were going to do, thank god they didn't do that. But I enjoy how it results in just a couple of lines of dialogue, and Atreus basically going, "Oh shit, I think I made a giant snake person." Anyway, back to Ironwood. Ironwood is, in essence, an area that could have been a quite reasonable 20 minutes long. Instead, it's about 1 hour and 45 minutes long, in my experience. Multiple factors fight against a long stay in this area. For one, Ragnarok is around the corner, and Atreus continually stresses he is in no rush to return home, seemingly forgetting about the whole end of the world thing around the corner. Angrboda's small arc of feeling lost without purpose because she doesn't appear in more of the visions is a pretty uncompelling character point, as Atreus and presumably every other person playing the game just goes, "Okay, well then just do what you want, then if you don't appear in a prophecy, then who... Wait, what exactly is your problem here?" Atreus' gameplay starts to demonstrate its lack of depth next to Kratos at this point, and there's a fair amount of battling to be done. There is one section where you literally go in a hole just to kill things for about 15 minutes, and it's simply the most boring, unnecessary part of maybe any God of War game I've ever played. And while the spectacle of fucking up a giant lady's magic casserole sounds cool, there are so many other, more relevant stories that could have been given attention in its absence. All in all, I also think Angrboda is better as a fun ally that we know little about. When she appears at Ragnarok with Fenrir, or throughout the game further still to chat with Atreus, she's much more compelling as this fun teenager that Atreus would very much like to spend some time with. One, because he's never known anyone his age, and two, because... her hour-and-a-half arc as troubled giant girl in the woods didn't really interest me any more than her just being an optimistic vision of what Atreus would pursue in the end. The giants. I've also seen people express that Freya forgives Kratos too easily, and I can certainly understand that point of view, but I think it's done very well. Kratos' scene wrestling Atreus down from killing her is my favourite moment of the game. and it demonstrates to Freya, as much as she hates it, that Kratos is a good father. Then throughout their journey in Vanaheim, dialogue and events slowly erode Freya's stubbornness and she eventually admits that maybe she won't kill him. I think in general it's quite a hard task the writers set themselves and it's really skillfully overcome. I do think, however, Freya is, in general, a little bit too polite in their journey throughout Vanaheim. At this point, Freya is angry with herself knowing that she promised to kill Kratos, but she's fundamentally a good person and has seen that Kratos seems to be as well at this point. Throughout Vanaheim, Freya shows that she is understandably frustrated with Kratos.
I am reaching my limit for enlightened platitudes from you today. Can you please just shut up and kill things?
But actually spends most of her time waxing lyrical and being nostalgic about her home realm. Freya spends a lot of time reflecting on her surroundings, sharing her memories, smelling the flowers and going, the sweet scent of Vanaheim honeysuckle, which, the espresso martini is... Oh, that's fucking nice, that. Hate coffee. Lovely smell. And you know, Freya's got some Yankee candles sitting about the house. You just know she has to. Bitches spend like 40 quid a pop in those bad boys. In general, I don't think it's terribly done, but it is very jarring to hear Freya go from furious at Kratos to monologuing about her first kiss and favourite flavour of ice cream. Apart from that, I think it's all top tier stuff.
You would stake your life on it?
Mint chocolate chip? You're goddamn right. The final example of the writers feeling the need to cram all of the lore into Ragnarok is, well, multiple small things. Either plot points that feel rushed or optional areas that feel like they lack that special bit of polish other parts of the game do so well. For example, Jormungandr, our giant snake friend, only appears once. At the start of the game, he pops up, says Ironwood, and then pisses off into the snow and we never hear from him again. We see young Jormungandr at the finale, but he's just a background prop that eventually gets punched into the past. Likewise, the final lead up to Ragnarok feels like it could have been a whole game in and of itself. Before we go to war, each character is tasked with uniting the realms to fight. Fair to say, that's a pretty big task and an epic enough one that could warrant a whole game by itself. It's something that everybody, Deus Ex Machina style, just wraps up within 20 minutes off screen. We find Surtur, he says he wants nothing to do with us, and then after maybe 60 seconds he changes his mind entirely and says, "Yeah, okay buddy, you can stab me right in the heart if you like."
Why won't you help us?
I don't want to.
Freyr unites the elves even though Freyr seems like more of a burnout loser to most of us. We never see what makes him such an icon to the people of Alfheim. The second optional area of Alfheim explores that lore, but it's not particularly insightful. The crater area of Vanaheim is beautiful, has great dragon boss fights and explores lore relating to Fae, but it is so entirely disconnected to the main story and lacks a satisfactory cinematic ending to conclude what the characters learn, that it feels more like a DLC area that's about 85% finished. Then there's the mystery of who blew the horn in God of War 2018. 4 years ago, at the height of Atreus' prepubescent godly rage, he tripped a circuit breaker and fell ill. In one of the highlights of the game, we see Kratos bring his son back to Freya under a blood-red sky, presumably the result of Thor beating his remaining son in a show of disappointment. As Kratos waits for the seemingly endless elevator to reach its peak under Freya's house, we hear the horn used to summon Jormungandr blown in the distance.
Somebody just called the serpent.
Who blew the horn and for what purpose was never revealed. Cory Barlog did state it would be revealed in a later story. To be fair, the sequel that took 4 years to make is a fairly reasonable assumption for that information to be revealed, and yet, it never was. I did my research just to be sure, and yes indeed, I did not miss it. There is no explanation. I'm not going to go deep into this, but if you set up a reveal, say you're going to reveal it, and then don't, that's cock cheese. It's bullshit. Either explain it, or don't build it at all. Noise the fuck out of me. We're going to move on. I'm sure there are many other threads I'm forgetting about. There's even a plot hole in the game. Atreus and Thrud go to Helheim, accidentally freeing the Hound of Hell Garm. The mask guides our short friends through the frozen waste, but grows quiet after Garm's release. The mask only glows in the presence of a mask segment or near what its holder desires most. So if a mask segment wasn't there, then why did the mask lead us to Helheim in the first place? Atreus says later on to Odin he mistranslated the mask runes in an offhanded line which felt like some of Atreus' wily improv to trick Odin.
So, I figured out what went wrong.
I mistranslated a word here.
Did you now?
But if that is genuinely true, then A, why did Atreus go to Helheim in the first place? And B, why did the mask glow like there was something to be found? That is, and I don't say this lightly, objectively the worst piece of writing in the game is, I'm fairly sure, it doesn't make any sense. And if it does, then writers, please do a better job of explaining how. I promise I was paying attention the whole time.
And then there are the many narrative threads we are left with after the credits roll.
Such is the popularity of God of War Ragnarok, much has been said about the ending, and while there are many amazing moments and great writing throughout the adventure, Ragnarok's ending is something that, the more time passes, the hollower it feels. Thankfully, it's eventful enough that in the moment I felt pretty satisfied at the time, but the longer I had to think about it, the more the logic seemingly fell apart in my head. As I've said, the game is all about expectation, prophecy. We see at the end of God of War 2018 that everything that's happened to Kratos and Atreus was foretold, after which we see the ominous painting of Kratos seemingly dying in Atreus' arms. Ragnarok continues this logic as we are repeatedly shown throughout the game that everything that has been prophesied has come to pass. It becomes such an undeniable reality that the latter half of the game involves the characters coming to terms with the fact that whatever they do, it seems that they cannot avoid fulfilling prophecy.
Fate only binds you if you let it. Do what is necessary, not because it is written.
Whether that be Atreus reuniting Skoll and Hati to stream across the sky with an arrow, or Heimdall's death at the hands of Kratos, or in the last game Baldur's needless death that came about, ironically, by Freya trying to prevent said needless death, the games do a good job of building the logic that prophecy is inevitable, no matter how much you try to avoid it. With that in mind, I thought the game was going to stick to that logic, but subvert the player's expectations in a different, more interesting way, that I'll explain further in a bit. The inevitability of each character's fate becomes more and more real as the story progresses, forcing both the player and the character to accept that eventually. Except the very end, where everything is actually fine. Kratos doesn't die, Tyr doesn't lead an army, Atreus doesn't befriend Odin, or whatever might be happening in that last panel. Now, I'll get to those final details in a moment, but the crux of why I found this such a slap in the face is simply that
no one mentions it afterwards.
Dozens of hours of gameplay and storytelling have built towards the prophecy will come true, whether you like it or not. And after that finale, not one single character addresses it. Not even Mimir says something as benign as, "Oh, Kratos, all that shit about you dying and stuff, none of that happens. Oh, that's a bit strange, isn't it?"
Now there's a very simple rule in storytelling, I don't know if this is taught like academically, but it feels very intuitive, which is if you spend the time to build up the rules of your universe, when those rules are broken, they have to be addressed. Otherwise, it feels like the writers are making any old shit up.
That logic can be anything from the rules of your universe to character traits. Here's a little example from The Last of Us Part 2. No major spoilers, but there's a section where Ellie and Jesse are looking for Tommy, and they're worried he might be in danger. Ellie in one moment gets the idea she might know where a character she hates is. She wants revenge against this person, and she wants to kill her. As we know from the games though, Ellie is extremely loyal to her friends and loved ones. But in this moment, instead of going to rescue her very much in danger friend Tommy, she chooses to chase after what might be her chance at revenge, abandoning Tommy in the process.
And before you say, yes Jordan, but the game is about revenge and how it changes Ellie. Yeah, I know, it's shut up, let me explain, okay?
This moment fails this test, not because Ellie does something seemingly out of character, but because the world doesn't address it. Well, more specifically, doesn't address it very well. Jesse's reaction to the apparent abandonment of one of his best friends is, well, it's a bit underwhelming.
Jesus Christ.
The best way to help Tommy is to go after Abby. You do this, I'm not saving your ass again.
I really hope you make it.
Yes, that is the impact you're getting out of this large character direction pivot. That's all you're getting. The relatively nonchalant reaction of Jesse and the lack of any bold directorial choices to highlight the importance of this moment, like a different camera angle or a music swell, makes the whole sequence feel inadequate. Like no one is addressing that Ellie is changing as a person. That comes across as poor storytelling because it makes Ellie feel like she's acting out of character, not that revenge has changed her character.
It's kind of fucked up you did that.
Likewise, God of War Ragnarok breaks the firmly rooted logic that all prophecy comes to pass, without suitably addressing it afterwards. In my experience, this made the story feel less like the characters had done something exceptional to overcome their fate, and more like the writers got scared about the idea of killing Kratos and changed their mind at the last second. Oh yes, but Jordan, Kratos has defeated fate before, and he talks about it a bunch. Yeah, he did, in those other games, years ago, where he travelled back in time to the Sisters of Fate, and he did a bunch of bonkers shit. It was really cool and weird. But that's not the rules of the story we're in right now. These two games exclusively demonstrate how unavoidable fate is at every turn, and Kratos is included in that. He isn't some wild card in the world. Everything he did in the first game was foretold. It's the ending of the first game. He's an open book like anyone else in this world. I really enjoyed how the game stuck to its guns with this, and I thought it was going to go down the lines of characters accepting their fate. You see characters try to fight their destiny all the time, but it always ends up biting them in the arse. In the latter half of the story, we see characters begin to accept that. Kratos says to Atreus as he fulfills the prophecy of Skoll and Hati with an unusually gravelly voice.
Fate only binds you if you let it. Do what is necessary, not because it is written.
And ultimately, while he didn't want war, he sees the necessity of it in the end, and off they go to Ragnarok. I knew this was the end of the Norse saga, and I thought this was Kratos accepting that he very well might be marching to his death, as he saw at the end of the last game. But he has taught his son well, achieved much more than he ever thought he would, and he has gained a new perspective on life in his final days with his son. In that moment at Ragnarok where Kratos stops before the wall, he has this epiphany, and as I was playing, I was sure this was the moment where he finally accepted his fate. I thought he was about to turn to Atreus and say,
Do what is necessary, not because it is written.
And explain that he thinks he's about to die, but it's okay now. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the end of everything though. Angrboda is distressed earlier in the story as she doesn't see herself in the prophecy at Ragnarok. She doesn't know what to do. Atreus explains that just because she doesn't know what's next doesn't mean she has no part to play in it. I thought this was a precursor to the idea I expected the game would end in. That is, the prophecy comes true. But Kratos doesn't actually die, and if he does, he's not dead for very long. I say that because all we know of the prophecy is this mural. That's it. At no point is Kratos told explicitly by a third party that prophecy is him dying and he's gone for good. He doesn't get a letter in the mail, no one explains it to him, we just find a painting and go, oh shit, that looks like Kratos dying.
Well, I suppose the Norns say, oh, I hate the Norns. I know lots of people like that, I hate the Norns. The Norns say, you will die, Ghost of Sparta. But it's such an obvious, on the nose, like, they're saying you will die in the same way you could say that to anyone who's ever lived, and you will be right. You know, like Kratos has died before, he'll die again. You know, it's just shit. You know what they are? They're shit stirrers, they're trolls. I don't know if they're actual trolls in universe, but they're goddamn acting like it. They're 4chan users.
No, the game has taught us the logic of giant soul magic and demonstrated it multiple times throughout the game with Fenrir and its limitations with Brock. I thought the grand twist was going to be, this isn't actually Kratos dying for good. This is his soul leaving him, and Atreus using soul magic to make sure he isn't lost for good. Wait a second, I've just realised now that I've got this clip in front of me that my assumption was completely correct. That's exactly what's mirrored in the ending, but with Odin in place of Kratos. Someone give me brownie points, please. Where that goes, I'm not sure, but there are many, many really good possibilities. Maybe it is his passing. Maybe Atreus would put his soul into one of those marbles and bring his soul back to Alfheim in an epilogue so that he could be reunited with Faye in the light for some final, well-deserved peace. Maybe Atreus captures his father's soul to trick Odin into a moment where he can finally come back and defeat him. The point is, there was, I thought, a very obvious opportunity to respect the universe's well-established logic of prophecy, without throwing everything out the window, and most importantly, not even addressing it afterwards. It doesn't though. Throughout the adventure, I was so impressed by the game's insistency on prophecy, and how it forced the characters eventually to mature and accept that reality. That the payoff for their bravery and sense of duty with the knowledge of Kratos' death would be realising that while you might know steps A, C and E, maybe the devil is in the details and step B and D will bring you to a conclusion you didn't expect at all.
And this isn't just me acting upset because the game didn't go with the ending I wanted. The game itself foreshadows that ending, to the point where it feels like the game itself is kind of making fun of its own writing.
Again, he misses the point.
Focusing on the second act to the exclusion of the final. A common mistake in storycraft.
What?
But even sweeping that, which I think is a much more powerful message and more confident storytelling aside, I also think there's perfectly reasonable ways to break the logic of prophecy in a smart and respectful way. A big aspect of why I find the sweeping under the rug of the game's prophecy talk at the end frustrating is because of how fundamentally prone to mumbo-jumbo a plot device like this is. Prophecy, time travel, magic, any of that.
And then I make my psychic selection, and if all goes well...
Something that's so mystical, there's always a danger of a writer having one lazy day at the keyboard.
He goes, oh, and then time travel and prophecy and blah blah blah, it was all fine in the end. Which feels like something God of War Ragnarok kinda does. But I have my own little fan theory to address this break in prophecy. I know it's my own little headcanon, but it makes me happy to think of it as true.
And that is that there was a wild card character in all of this. But no, it's not Kratos. Here's the thing though, prophecy has two mechanisms in the Norse world. That is what the Norns predict, and what the giants have visions of. Now, I want to say right now, the games do not do a good job of differentiating these two things. I originally thought the Norns predicted Ragnarok, but they say that they just predict what people do. And if that's all they do, then how the hell did they figure out there would be a winter that lasted 3 years, the end of the world happened, and then a fat guy would punch a giant snake so hard it would go back in time? I think all of that was actually just seen by giants' visions, where I suppose that makes a little bit more sense, but this is never explicitly explained, which is another reason that the prophecy logic can feel a bit weak to me. Some of the rules surrounding it are unclear.
So with all that in mind, if there's one character that prophecy wouldn't be able to figure out, Norns or otherwise, who would it be?
Maybe someone who's not sure of what they're doing themselves. Maybe someone who's missing a sense of direction. Oh, wait a second. Fuck! Now, isn't Brock missing a part of his soul which, quote, gives him a sense of direction? Well, hot damn, if there's one character who would be more unpredictable as to throw a wrench in the works of prophecy, then wouldn't it be Brock? The Norns surely can't predict what a dwarf that's missing his soul sense of direction is, and surely the giants and their giant soul magic the game talks about so much would be thrown off by someone like that as well. And let's think about the story. All the prophecies come true, except that Tyr would lead an army, Kratos would die and Atreus would end up helping Odin. Well, Tyr finally chooses to lead an army until Brock, the pesky little blue boy that he is, calls him out, resulting in his own death and Tyr being outed as a fake. So everything was going to prophecy's perfect plan until Brock, brave little guy that he is, got involved.
But don't that get the old juices flowing?
I really love this theory as it gives extra importance to Brock, who was originally a comedy character but really earned your respect over the course of the game. It would mean his death was not in vain. It does not break the logic of prophecy that the games had set up in a cheap way. It would leave us with some introspection for the characters to reflect on what could have been if it wasn't for Brock. And it would give Sindri somewhat of a sense of closure knowing that his brother did something literally no one else could, and it was all because of his mistake he was so ashamed of.
Now if all of that isn't really solid storytelling, I'll be darned. Yes, I know I made it up, but it makes me happy to think of it as true. And also, I've told a good 3 or 4 people at this point, including a professional video games writer, and they all really like the idea. So I can only hope that someone from Sony Santa Monica sees this video, takes my idea, goes back in time, and puts it in the game because I think it's better.
All of that aside, I have to say, I'm surprised more people don't feel the same way about the end of Ragnarok. I've seen most people online talk about how they feel Ragnarok itself was too short, which I don't disagree with actually. God of War 2018's ending with Baldur and the Giant certainly has more spectacle to it. Thor's initial battle is far more exciting. I love his twist death, it showed just how fantastically fucked up and fatalistic Odin was. But then you 3-on-1 him fairly easily. Most people seem to enjoy the ending itself, however. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of them. I said this game is about expectation. We know this is the end of the Norse saga. Cory Barlog said years ago there would only be 2 games in the saga. We thought we knew that this was the end of Kratos himself, but ignoring the fact that Kratos didn't die, that's not the reason the game feels like it lacks a proper conclusion to me. It doesn't even feel like a cliffhanger. The end of Ragnarok just feels...
lost?
Odin has been defeated, Atreus made a smart choice to destroy the mask and whatever monkey paw-like antic it may have produced, and we now find ourselves in a quiet epilogue where we see Asgardian refugees huddled around fires dotted up the mountainside. Kratos reveals Angraboda's new mural of the future, and Kratos sees himself worshipped as a just god for the first time ever. Faced away from the camera, we see him trembling, presumably overcome with emotion. I've seen people online say this sequence made them cry, that they thought it was so powerful, and I didn't care for it in the slightest. For a few reasons, and the most important one to me is Kratos doesn't care what other people think of him. Kratos doesn't care if you love him or hate him. Yes, he's more of an open, kinder man now. He sees the value in his new companions and the time and information they share together. But that doesn't change his personality fundamentally. He cares about being a better man / god. He cares that his son grows up with the wisdom and love of his mother, with the skill and resilience of his father. Most importantly, however, Kratos cares that his son grows up to be a better god than he ever was. If this mural at the end was Atreus being worshipped as a just god, then I'm in tears just thinking about it. He's always told his son to be better, and while he doesn't care what other people think of him, to know that he succeeded in raising his son such that he is worshipped as a just god is far, far more powerful an image to me. You might say, oh, well Jordan, multiple people bring up being loved as a god, and you're right. Freya and Odin both express at one point,
In your lifetimes, has anyone ever worshipped you? Ever prayed to you? Can you even imagine that kind of love? No!
But nothing about Kratos' character has ever indicated, through dialogue or otherwise, that he would even care to learn what that was. People like that don't care for fame or love from the masses. They have more important personal goals, like the proper raising of their son. And while that is a subject brought up by characters, there are no great demonstrations of what that love might be like, and Kratos' response. We don't see other gods be worshipped by their followers in an intimate way that Kratos thinks of good. Freya is mostly seen as a traitor by many of those in Vanaheim. The elves love Freyr, but we don't see that firsthand. We see people give offerings to Odin, but these seem more like mandatory tax returns than boxes of chocolates given out of love. That's the main reason it didn't hit me, but also, just from a directorial point of view, I can't see the guy's goddamn face. In this scene, I'm sure he's sad or overwhelmed with emotion, but as someone who is currently taking acting for camera classes, we kind of need to see your face to understand your emotion. And also, the mural itself is quite hard to read. I only realised in watching the footage back the mural is painted over whatever was carved beforehand. On top of that, it's really low resolution and it's quite a tight close-up as well, so it took me a few moments to really understand what I was looking at. And perhaps, this is the most important point, the end of the game changes the rules, showing us that prophecy doesn't matter at all. So who gives a shit what Angraboda's painting now? It probably won't come true.
You are nothing!
I can completely understand people finding this powerful, the idea that Kratos would be overwhelmed at the idea he achieved something he never thought possible. But my experience of Kratos the character and this story meant that my instinctual reaction to this scene was, oh, I don't think he cared that much. And nothing more. You know, I saw a headline the other day that put it quite aptly that Ragnarok folded when it should have went all in. But all of those points aside, that's not the main reason why Ragnarok's ending feels hollow to me. Because expectations that they are, I expected something that felt a little bit more conclusive. I don't even mean Kratos dying or disappearing or whatever it may be, but the very fact the game lets you run around completing side quests afterwards only increases that feeling. As the credits begin to roll, Kratos says,
"There is much to do."
And I, not quite satisfied with the ending I'd just been given, wondered at what this meant. I got excited at the idea of a proper conclusion that I was looking for post-game. Sure enough, when you leave the hold, you learn of Brock's funeral, and off I went to Svartalheim, and it's sad. Not in the obvious way that funerals are sad, but there's barely anyone there. You walk into the bar, listen to a few of his friends say some words, and then you stand there awkwardly with a beheaded Scotsman attached to your belt, and then head off to his funeral. And Brock's funeral is a nice scene, but it does not offer that end-of-the-game conclusion on multiple fronts. On one hand, it feels very odd that, after all this time, Atreus doesn't join you. That he has already left on his adventure to find the giants. And also, while Sindri is a fantastic character and I hope I see more of him, this is the beginning of a new arc for him, not an end. If this is the end of the Norse saga, then is this the ending for Sindri? This is the end of our journey with him? He's just angry? That's one aspect I think my little fan theory would put a nice little full stop at the end of. Sindri would be given the opportunity for closure, knowing what his brother achieved through his incomplete soul. Back to what really happened, then Kratos turns away and the screen fades to black in what I thought was a glitch because the game is so dedicated to the one camera shot aesthetic that a fade out looks like the backlight on your TV just died. But no, it's another set of credits. Little did I know, that was the final epilogue, when Kratos says,
"There is much to do."
He's kind of talking out his arse.
Yes, there's side missions to do, there's MacGuffins to find and angry people to punch in the snow, but where is the end? Where is the moment where Kratos just sits and has peace? Even if Kratos didn't die like many of us were expecting, there's no real moment of introspection where Kratos just sits with his son or allies and reflects on his new life he's made for himself. I didn't know there was nothing left of plot value to explore, but I kept on looking, and the longer I went on, the more stressed I became. I cannot express how much the epilogue of this game became an exercise in acceptance. More so because the game continues to tease you with narrative. You find Tyr, the actual, real Tyr, in an Asgardian prison that's left in Niflheim. This blew my mind, and yet, it's not even a cutscene. We see one of the most important characters across the two games, and I'm sitting there wanting to scream, "Oh my god, mate, it's nice to meet you, I'm Kratos. We thought we found you, but I'm a god from another land, by the way. We thought we found you, but it was Odin, and a bunch of shit. Oh, it was bonkers. We had this blue friend." You go, you know. In fact, I think a really lovely conclusion would have been in that moment to have a proper cutscene and sit down with Tyr, and we watch Kratos begin to tell his grand story of the last two games, before which we cut to black. A lovely full stop as Kratos gets to reflect on his journey and success as a father and better man than he ever was. But Tyr basically says, "Go away."
No, what I need most now, I think, is to reflect on what you've told me.
Then if you travel back to certain locations throughout the realms, Tyr will be meditating, pondering on the location and what's happened there. In some instances, he'll quite plainly ask you to leave him alone.
Tyr.
I would be left alone, please.
Of course.
And all this did was fuel my anxiety more. To reveal something like this, for it to amount to nothing, feels so confusing. He's arguably the most important character in the series. We finally meet the real man himself, and he's relegated to basically a tourist information sign throughout the realms. I think it's a huge mistake, and it feels like one of those many additions in this game where the writers knew this was the finale of the Norse saga and wanted to squeeze in everything, even if it would be better left on the cutting room floor. As I previously mentioned, the crater in Vanaheim is a big location which delves into some history concerning Fae. It's a real interesting location, both lore-wise, the environments and the great dragon battles you have. It also gives some story to that nice massive bloke who, somewhat hilariously, sacrifices himself during Freyr's rescue by jumping off a boat, even though I didn't even know the guy's name. So it was very nice of him, I appreciate it.
What is it, Craig? Aye, no, nice to meet you. If you're having second thoughts, I'll give you a shove if you like.
But with how disconnected it is from the main plot, and sense of conclusion it lacks from having any sort of dedicated cutscene to wrap things up, it feels like a DLC area that you could have added a couple of things to, released a couple of months in, and it would have felt like a much more complete product. In a way, the post-game of wandering endlessly throughout the realms with Freya feels like a dangerous vision of the future. The Norse God of Wars are fantastically intimate stories, where the performances are oftentimes the highlight. But where a Red Dead Redemption will kill off your main character, or a Last of Us will cut to black at shocking moments, those games are not afraid to tell the player, "Hey, it's time to go home now." God of War feels nervous of that though. God of War 2018 had an intriguing epilogue where Atreus has a vision of Thor's visit, after which you can continue to explore the land with your father and his piece of headless Scotsman jewellery. That post-game makes sense. Fimbulwinter is beginning and you're training for what's to come. However, Ragnarök is a game that in so many ways defines the end for characters. It is certainly a game that should have the guts to say, "It's time to go home now." But it doesn't. And that emptiness that becomes of seeking a proper conclusion post-game that isn't there, finding important characters that have nothing to say to you, exhausting dialogue with your allies until you wander quietly through the snow in awkward silence, like Freya just farted and everyone's too uncomfortable to mention it.
Shame on you.
And finishing side quests that do not offer you the cinematic wrapping up of a tale the game has demonstrated it is so good at. The side areas that do succeed in that respect are hit and miss. My favourite is the first desert in Alfheim where Kratos reveals, really he just wants to spend time with his son.
Have you ever considered he just wants to spend time with you, lad, while he still can?
Really?
We do not know what lies ahead, but if Ragnarök approaches, I wish to enjoy the time we have left.
Likewise, battling the final Valkyrie with Freya ends in a touching scene where she tries to convince her sister that they were both betrayed. Try as she might, all she can do is give her a dignified end. However, then there's the second area of Alfheim, which talks about the elves' love for Freyr, but it isn't especially deep and also gets you a relic that I think you're supposed to give to the two elves in camp, but I never got a response for them. It felt empty. Clearing all the remnants of Asgard or the Muspelheim trials, likewise, they amount to nothing. This game feels like it's worried, oh, we need the player to be able to do everything post-game because then people will be upset if they can't, instead of just making bold choices with their characters and ending. Opting to have the perfectly acceptable endgame text box of, well done for completing the game, travel back to before Ragnarök to complete other activities. This game feels scared of taking Kratos away from you. The eventual hollowness that travelling through the snow until there's nothing left gives you is more profoundly depressing than any bold, Last of Us-esque cut-to-black finale that the devs are seemingly afraid of could ever feel though. It feels like a worrisome vision of the future where, even though the writers demonstrated strong character writing and bold twists, Kratos will be deemed to wander about endlessly, culture to culture like a travelling YouTuber because they were too afraid to give the man with a completed arc some peace. People online discuss, oh, where will Kratos go next? I want to see him go to Egypt.
Why? To do what? The man had an arc. He's done now.
He was a horrible person who destroyed everything and everyone because he wanted some peace from his horrible memories. Then Cory Barlog thought of a great idea where he channeled his newfound fatherhood into a fantastic concept where he would take an irredeemable man and put him in a position where he's forced to be a father. What type of father would he be? Would he overcome his nature to better himself and his son, or would he be lost to his old ways and estranged from his son? We saw him evolve from a man who barely grunts in response to a question, who now actively discusses and values both the opinions and knowledge of his newfound allies. He has proved himself a better man, god and father now than he ever thought possible. People may think that they want him to travel throughout the universe in some sort of, now that's what I call Kratos greatest hits, but God of War 2018 and this game were not interesting because they were in Norse mythology. They were interesting because it took a broken, deeply flawed man and gave him a challenge. So with that in mind, what the fuck does he do in Egypt? What is his goal? What's his conflict?
Oh, Atreus wants to go to the beach, but there's no sand in Norway. Like, fuck off. You're dumb, right? As much as any stupid teenager on the internet wants to see Kratos go to the moon to fight the gods of space, none of those things are why these games were good.
That doesn't necessarily mean he has to die, or even that we won't play as him again. But in the end, the line,
there is much to do,
feels like more of a warning than anything else. That's what this game is afraid of in the end, of letting Kratos and the player know, hey, it's time to go home now.
Would you join me?
Aye.
And that is God of War Ragnarök and the Curse of Expectation, a video 4 months in the making, one of my longest ones yet. I hope you have enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you like it? Was it informative? Was it funny? Was it emotional? Did you look at me for the first time and feel a flutter in your heart? If you have any ideas of things you would like me to cover next, please let me know in the comments. But I shall soon be returning to a little card game that I talked about once before, and it will be a lot of fun. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.